Alright, so step number one, we're going to clone the Deckard Gradle GitHub repo, and we'll paste the URL from the GitHub page into the VCS repository URL field, and then IntelliJ just does all the rest. We don't have to care about the Git syntax or whatever. We're going to rename that to something special. And then IntelliJ recognizes that this is a Gradle project, and so it'll convert the build.gradle structure to the IntelliJ project structure with modules and everything. So I sped this up about 10 times. But when this is done, we'll need to change the order of the dependencies, since the first dependency, the Android 19 API, the SDK for Android, it conflicts with JUnit. And so we'll want that to be very last in the list. We can do that here in the project structure dialog or inside the IML file. And so if we go to the entry here, the ordered entry for Android API, and we'll just delete that and put it in the back of the list here. It's an ordered list, so I guess the XML parser will recognize this as the very last thing, and then it'll resolve that afterwards. Okay, so when that's done, we'll need to change the output directory for our test classes. And in order to do that, we can just go back to the project structure dialog again and open the Paths tab, and we'll need to instruct the compiler to output our test classes to a variation of the default output path. So we'll just copy that and remove the last bit. And this is a little unique to Robolectric, but it allows us to write unit tests that run locally. Okay, so we'll apply that, and then the very last step is the Espresso stuff. So Espresso is a framework from Google to run unit tests on the device. And we'll need to change the build configuration for Android tests to use the Google Instrumentation Test Runner. So all Android tests within the Robolectric demo module will use this Instrumentation Test Runner. Right, and remember we differentiate Android tests from JUnit tests, because the Android test configuration will run on a device, or in this case on an emulator, and JUnit tests will run on our IDE. Okay, so now that we've figured all this out, we can take a look at the project structure and dive into unit testing. This is a pretty standard project structure for Android. You can drop into the source directory and see that we have our sources and resources and manifest and so forth, right? And so the test directory, it mirrors the source directory, so we put our tests in the same branch under the test subtree. And you can see that IntelliJ picks this up. It recognizes that these are the corresponding classes that are being tested. It's not oblivious to this this configuration, right? So we'll just run this unit test to get started and make sure that we're picking up these resources. We'll run it as a JUnit test, and there's a problem to start off with, right? Because we're running off kind of an experimental branch of Robolectric. So we'll need to explicitly declare that this is the manifest file in order for it to find those particular resources. And we'll just help out Robolectric here by adding a config annotation and saying, this is where my Android manifest is located, go and read it and get me those resources so that I can reference them in my tests. Okay, and then so we'll just run this again to make sure it passes. And it's still a little rough around the edges, but remember it's an early version, and Robolectric is a well-respected and widely used unit testing framework for Android, so we'll let it slide. And it looks like our unit test now passes, so this is a good thing, right? This is what we like to see. Our unit tests are all green. Let's dive into a little unit testing on Android now. And here it's just like anywhere else, right? We write our test, it fails, we write the implementation, and hopefully it passes. This is the ideal, right? This is what we're aiming for. And with IntelliJ and Robolectric, it makes it very easy for us to do that. So our first test here, we'll just make sure that our activity is finishing whenever there's an empty bundle, right? And we expect this to fail to begin with, right? Because we haven't implemented this behavior. And so let's just go into our activity, our Deckard activity, and add that functionality now. If there's no extras inside the bundle, we want to just close it immediately. And let's assume this isn't our main activity for now. So if our saved instance state is null or the saved instance state is empty, then finish, right? Now let's run this again and see if it passes. This is a pretty simple example of a unit test on Android. We'll dive into more in-depth topics like mocking and dependency injection, but I just want to give you a taste of what it's like to develop for Android on IntelliJ IDEA, and hopefully it's not too unfamiliar. It looks like our test is passed. Congratulations! Now you're ready to start writing your own unit tests with Robolectric on IntelliJ IDEA.